Welcome back to Games That Never Existed, the series where I look at sequels to games that never came to fruition. In this episode, I examine Sly 5, the long-awaited sequel to the Sly Cooper series, and tell you exactly what happened to this game series. But of course, all stories must start at the beginning. And the story of Sly Cooper and its development is actually pretty similar to the story of another beloved PS2-era classic game franchise, and that's Jak and Daxter. And the story of these two franchises are so similar that it's almost kind of uncanny. But this will be important later on in the video. So, for now, I'll go on with the history. So first of all, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus was the first game in the series released by Sucker Punch in 2002. Sly Cooper was Sucker Punch's breakout game and was extremely well received, leading to two also very well received sequels, Sly 2 released in 2004 and Sly 3 released in 2005. While the original game had more of kind of a Crash Bandicoot-like level setup, where it was individual levels attached to a hub area, Sly 2 and Sly 3 added on to this with a more fluid mission structure, new gameplay mechanics, etc., and helped to keep the series fresh and innovative. All three of these games performed very, very well, and Sucker Punch had originally intended for Sly to be a trilogy of games, nothing more, because by the time that Sly 3 was released in 2005, the new generation of consoles was on the horizon, and Sucker Punch wanted to dive into a new IP for the PS3 generation. So that was supposed to be it. Sly 3 capped off the storyline, capped off the series, and Sucker Punch went on to develop the Infamous series over the next few years. But while Sucker Punch's involvement ends there, Sly Cooper's tale does not. See, after Sucker Punch had moved on to Infamous, a small game developer by the name of Cesaro Games had taken an interest in the Sly games, and they wanted to develop a new one. And in order to accomplish this, they developed a new prototype game engine in order to present to Sony to try to convince them to let Cesaro develop a new Sly game. Sony ended up really liking the game engine. So, first they started by commissioning Cesaro to develop the PS3 port of the original Sly trilogy, which was released in 2010. And after the Sly collection was well received, Sony ended up greenlighting the production of another Sly game, Sly 4, Thieves in Time. Now Sly 4 did pretty well, but not quite as well as Sucker Punch's original games, and the sales were somewhat lackluster. Still, the game was rated pretty well by critics. Now, this is the part where things get kind of interesting. Sly 4 actually leaves off on a cliffhanger ending, with Sly presumably being lost in ancient Egypt while his friends are searching for his whereabouts. It definitely seemed that with the pretty decent reviews and this cliffhanger ending, a Sly 5 was definitely in the works and it was surely just around the corner. But then, nothing. Nothing happened, and time passed. Cesaro continued to develop other games, and nothing happened. Then, in November of 2014, Cesaro made the following statement, quote, "I wanted to respond to a lot of the questions regarding Cesaro games and Sly Cooper. While we, like you, dearly love the Cooper gang, we are not currently working with PlayStation on a project, and there are no plans to work on another Sly Cooper title." End quote. And that's it. That's all the information we have. Back in 2013, there had been some quote-unquote leaks of a Sly 5 poster and box art, but let's be real here, those easily could have been faked. And neither Sony nor Cesaro has spoken a single word on Sly 5 in the 6 years since. And hell, look, Sucker Punch hasn't had anything to do with the series in 14 years. And that's what makes all of this kind of sad. It's clear that originally there must have been a Sly 5. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense at all for them to end this on a cliffhanger. They must have originally been planning for another Sly game. Yet somehow, there's nothing at all. There's no concept art, there's no development cycle, there's not even really any real leaks. I mean, there's rumors, but none of them seem to be based on anything substantial. And hell, Cesaro didn't even say, oh yeah, well, we officially abandoned it because of this and this and this. No, they didn't do that. They said nothing at all. They just said, hey, we're not going to do this. And I had said earlier that the story of Sly kind of reminded me of the story of Jak and Daxter, and this is the part where that information becomes relevant again. Both game series had a trilogy of great games on the PS2, after which both developers ended up moving on to a new IP for the next generation PS3. Both series ended up being picked up by another game developer to make a new game, but the thing is, in Jak's case, Naughty Dog was actually involved in the game, unlike Sucker Punch, who had just counted their money and left years ago at this point. And both game series now lie abandoned. But while they are pretty similar in that regards, there is one big difference. Even though Naughty Dog wanted to make a Jak 4, Jak's story was at least tied up pretty well at the end of Jak 3, and they didn't really need a Jak 4. Yet Naughty Dog still wanted to make it happen, and just couldn't because they were too busy. And while Sucker Punch never really wanted to make another Sly game, and they had wrapped it up really good at the end of Sly 3, Cesaro willingly opened that storyline and that box back up again, only to then leave it abandoned once again after one game and leaving it on a cliffhanger. And trust me, I've tried to look for new information, but there's just nothing out there. Nothing reliable, at least. There's a lot of hearsay and nonsense, but nothing that comes from anything even close to an official source. Hell, if you look at recent things on Google about Sly 5, the only thing that even pops up is videos from other YouTubers talking about Sly 5 rumors and speculating about the game. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, I don't think it's likely that we'll ever get a Sly 5. Out of the 3 companies that are involved with the making of the Sly Cooper series, number 1, Sucker Punch has long left the series alone. Number 2, Cesaro is busy making ports and remasters of other games after specifically saying they were done with Sly Cooper. And number 3, I really doubt that Sony would find a new developer for a Sly 5, because the only reason Sony even greenlit Sly 4 in the first place was because Cesaro wanted to make a Sly 4. And since Cesaro doesn't seem to be interested in that anymore, why would Sony spend money to make a new game? It just doesn't seem to make any sense. And so the future doesn't look very good for Sly 5. Then again, look, I could always be wrong. It's always possible that Cesaro could come back into it, or perhaps another developer will find interest and pick it up. But to be honest, at this point in time, that does seem fairly unlikely. The one thing, however, that may be a saving grace of sorts is the fact that there are a couple of multimedia Sly Cooper projects in the works, and a lot of people speculate that these projects will help revive the series and will bring on Sly 5. Now, the first project, a Sly Cooper movie, looks pretty good, but the problem is, it seems to have been in development hell for years, and at this point, it may never actually even be released, which unfortunately is not a very promising outlook for the series. But the second media project, an animated cartoon TV series, does seem like it's going to premiere in October of this year. Now, if this cartoon does come to fruition, and if it gets good ratings, that may be enough to stir up some demand for Sony to order a Sly 5 to be made by another developer. But the truth is, that's relying on a lot of ifs. Even if the TV show does do well in the ratings, the movie may still never come out. And even then, you'd think that Cesaro would at least pretend that they're interested in making a Sly game if they ever actually planned on being involved in the series again. Look, I know I sound a bit salty, but I'm really not trying to hate on Cesaro here. The truth is, I can neither condemn them nor defend their actions because they never really told us exactly why they're not making a Sly 5. They just said they're not doing it. Is it because they're too busy? I mean, probably. But I don't really know. Is it because of the somewhat crappy sales? It could be that too. But the thing is, we don't know this information. Cesaro never told us. So at the end of the day, I can't really be mad at them because I don't know why it didn't happen. But at the same time, I'm a little bit frustrated because they never even said anything. They just said, yeah, man, we're not doing it. So while it is possible for there to be a Sly 5, and at the end of the day, it probably is more likely that we'll get a Sly 5 than us getting a Jack 4, at the end of the day, it's still really up into the air as if we'll ever actually see a new Sly game. And look, another thing to think about is the fact that Sly 4 really wasn't as good as Sly 3 and the previous games in the series. Now, was Sly 4 a bad game? No, it was pretty decent, but at the same time, it was not as good as the original trilogy. So maybe perhaps it's better that we don't get a Sly 5. Because at the end of the day, when a gaming franchise is bounced around between multiple developers and a longer and longer amount of time passes between games, sometimes the results don't turn out very good. I mean, just look at Duke Nukem Forever. That was a disaster. Now, I'm not saying that Sly 5, if it ever came out, would be like that, but it could. It's definitely possible, and just because they make a Sly 5, that may not be the Sly 5 that the fans end up wanting. At the end of the day, it might just be a letdown. Sometimes it's just better to let the sleeping dogs lie.